All right, welcome everyone to today's live discussion on the coffee systems map. This is the fourth in a series of 4 discussions that we are doing about the SCA's coffee systems map. I'm your host. If you're just joining us for the first time in this conversation, my name is Elena Ionescu. I'm the Chief Sustainability and Knowledge Development Officer for the SCA. I'm looking forward to our discussion on roasting and brewing today. Before we get started, I should thank Savor Brands, whose video you just saw. They are our sponsor underwriting this whole series of 4 conversations. And if you didn't see the earlier ones, then I encourage you to go back and catch up on the discussions that we had about farming and processing, importing, and exporting. Also, if this is the first time you're joining us, I'll just go through a few quick housekeeping suggestions and let you know how to share your questions with us. So in GoToWebinar, you should see that there's a panel that you have, and you have the option to ask questions via chat. So you don't have to wait till the end. I'll probably be asking your questions of the panelists toward the end of the time that we have today, after we go through the introductions and I ask them some questions of my own. But at any point, if you want to address a question to an individual or to all of the panelists, just use the question function to do that. And then I will read those out loud. If you'd rather I not say your name when I read your question, then please also include that. Say, I'd rather this be anonymous. And let's see, once we finish today's discussion, you'll get a link to the recording as someone who registered for the webinar, but we'll also post those online at the sca.coffee/watch page. And like I said a minute ago, you can also catch up on previous discussions from this series, all of which are there. Next slide. So today's panelists, I will show you, I'll go through and introduce them all briefly, and then talk a little bit about how we found them and the structure of today's conversation before I pass the mic to each of them to introduce themselves. But I'm really pleased to be joined today by Joan Kithika, Cleia Junqueira, and Elvira Conty-Nieves, who is just dropping her daughter off at daycare. So we'll have Elvira in just a minute. And we found these 3 panelists by putting out a call on our Instagram and Twitter to the broader community for recommendations on whom to include in our conversations about each of these activities in the coffee systems map. So we asked the community, and we got back probably I don't know, a few dozen suggestions, names. You know, people got tagged in each of these posts, and we followed up with all of the tagged individuals with some questions based on this coffee systems map for them to respond to. And when we collected all of that input, we followed up, and that's how we found the 3 panelists that we have today. But the discussion that we'll have today really reflects some of the other responses that we received to this call for questions and call for perspective also. having done now 3 of these, this being the 4th, one of the really fun things that, for me at least, about this series has been to meet new people, hear new perspectives that maybe at the SCA we haven't heard or haven't at least used our platform to share in the past. Because there is a huge diversity of experience in all of these different subjects that we are exploring here. Each of these activities, whether we're talking about farming or processing, exporting, importing, roasting, brewing, this is a really global community that we have, and there are so many different interpretations and experiences with it, and it's nice and interesting to be able to hear different people's experiences at different scale, different geographies, etc. So thank you to everyone who participated. If you are on the call right now, if you either responded to our questions or tagged someone you thought we should talk to, then I just want to, thank you for that input, because it is made for a richer conversation. Next slide. I am not going to go into the history of this coffee systems map today, this tool. If you are wondering where it came from, how it was developed, why we made some of the choices that we made, then I encourage you to go to the Coffee Systems Map page on the SCA site, and you can find a couple of other talks, webinars that have been done specifically about the development of the map. Also some articles and the map itself in a form that you can zoom in on better than you're going to be able to zoom in on the slides that we have today. So if you want to learn more, then go check that out anytime. Next slide. So so I said that we sent out questions to all of the people that we heard we should be talking to, we should be asking questions of about these different supply chain activities. And the questions that we asked were all the same. So we had everyone respond to the same 4 questions, starting with which activities are you involved with? Then which actors are you most familiar with? Which actors are you least familiar with? And are there other actors you would like to be more connected with? And the idea behind this was to just get a sense from people who are working in maybe similar activities themselves, how broadly their own experience reaches, how many different activities are they involved in, and then where are the strongest relationships, the strongest connection, and where are there gaps that maybe present us with an opportunity for some kind of future strengthening and a change to the way that the system works. Because ultimately that's what this map is trying to depict, is how the coffee system, the supply chain, but also all of these other contributors to it, how does it work, and how could we change it to improve it? Next slide. So when I say what activities are you involved in, I'm talking about these 6 circles here that are in the central column of the systems map. And these are the activities that the supply chain roles that are probably most associated with the depiction of coffee's journey from seed to cup, or however it is that you might characterize it. It's this kind of these sorts of individuals and these roles that are the ones that we are probably the most familiar with. So that's where we're focusing in this series, is on these activities and the people who are engaged in these activities on a day-to-day basis. And while we've depicted them all separately, there's plenty of overlap between them, and many people, probably everyone that we've featured on these past webinars, is involved in more than one of them. So while they're depicted as being separate from one another, there's an enormous amount of overlap. And I think that's probably a great segue into the introductions by each of our panelists of themselves and of what they do, what activities they're involved in, a little bit about their own businesses. So Joan, I'll start with you. Can you introduce yourself, say a little bit about your business and which activities you're involved with?
Thank you, Kim. Hello, everyone. So I work for African Coffee Roasters, and we're a coffee roasting company based in Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya. And we are unique in the sense that I believe we are among the first to roast coffee in a country of origin, a coffee producing region, and export it to Europe straight to retail stores. African Coffee Roasters was born out of a project between coffee producer groups in Kenya here, central Kenya, and a Danish coffee roastery. And due to the success of the project, we were able to establish very good linkages between the cooperative society and the roastery in Denmark, to the extent that the cooperative gained so much visibility that at the tail end of the project, when it became apparent that the next level to move to was to build a roastery in a country of origin, to bring the farmers closer to consumers and to bring the farmers closer to the people who are developing the recipes and making product development, and Africa Coffee Roasters therefore came to being. African Coffee Roasters had outpriced itself of the coffee from the coffee cooperative because of the very great networks and the linkages and the visibility they got out of the Coffee for a Better Future project. But that then speaks to the success of the project, and also speaks to the need to have a roasting facility of the caliber and magnitude as we do have here as African Coffee Roasters. And therefore, we were able to attract investors who came and put a state-of-the-art facility here in Kenya, something which, when we were setting up the company, repeatedly, what we had, because I was very privileged to be part of the founding team of this company, what we had repeatedly was, you cannot roast a coffee from a country of origin, specifically in Africa, and take it to Europe for consumption. It can never happen. The taste profiles are different. The water is different. And it is true, the taste profile is different. The water is different. But if you have the know-how, if you have the goodwill from the countries where you're exporting to, then it is possible. And we have been doing it for 5 years, because this is the 5th year of the company. And whereas we are not a large-scale roaster, we are a specialty roaster, so to speak, but we are very large in the sense that we are the only ones who do what we do here in Kenya. And here in Sub-Saharan Africa, I believe we are the only ones who do what we do to the extent that we do it. And our business is continually growing. Just to give you an example, by September, in this COVID-19 year, we had already exported 700 tons of roasted coffee to Europe, which was below our expectation in terms of what we had projected without COVID-19. But with COVID-19, we were still able to achieve that target, and we are growing exponentially. So yeah, so as far as my role as African Coffee Roaster is concerned, I mentioned I was one of the founding members of the company, but also I do certification. I deal with the farmers directly, because the premise for having this factory in Africa was to bring the farmers closer to roasters, to people who buy their coffee, who develop the recipes, who deal with the consumers, and also to bring farmers closer to consumers, because then consumers would come here to African Coffee Roasters and have a platform which is accessible to farmers to come and interact with. So I deal with the farmers very much in identifying sustainability projects and options that we can move into as African Coffee Roasters, based on our experience and based on bringing development through trade and not just aid or making wells. Not that there's anything wrong with wells, but just to make it more sustainable, that there's some exchange going on. So I deal with the farmers, I deal with the food safety certification here, and I also deal with a bit of IT here. Yes.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's great. You know, the position of African Coffee Roasters and how you all operate, and I think it's a good example of how this map is meant to be illustrative of how many supply chains work, but of course they don't all look like that, and sometimes the roasting of coffee happens before the exporting and importing, instead of happening as it's depicted here after, or after the coffee is imported and exported. Cleia, I'll move to you next. Can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what activities you were involved in.
Yeah, sure. So I've been working with coffee for 15 years now. So I passed through barista training and I was coffee shop owner in Brazil. Then I was pretty much involved in training and organizing coffee courses in Brazil before I came to Dubai. So since I'm in UAE, working in Coffee Planet as roast master, my job is not only managing the roastery, but also I'm responsible to choose which coffee beans we are going to use. So I deal a lot with the farmers or the traders to choose which coffee. So we discuss like which coffee should be better for our blends or for our single origins coffees, because we are the biggest specialty coffee roasters in the region. And so as Q grader and Robusta grader, I have a team of other Q graders working with me for cupping. That also is part of my job, is as well taking care of quality control and R&D also for new products, so such as Nespresso compatible capsules, pods, and then I also help my colleague with the audits when we have, because we have so many different certifications in the roastery, like UTZ, ISO 22000, BRC, Halal, HACCP, and soon we are going to have kosher as well. And so what else? Yeah, so I'm responsible for all the coffee that we roast, the blends, and we roast from 23 different origins. We export for 13 countries, not only in the region, but also Europe and North of Africa and also Asia. And part of my job is also dealing with our sales team, helping them with our clients, which coffee they prefer for their hotels or coffee shops or whatever. So if I need to develop a new blend, it's me who they call, and then of course taking care of the coffee that our clients are drinking as well. And so brewing is also very important, because it's not only about roasting and make sure that's well roasted. We need to assure that the coffee drinkers are going to get what was designed to be drinking. So yeah, that's it.
Thanks. As you were talking about your own history, it made me think about the fact that, you know, we are asking you all to talk from the perspective of the business that you're now in, you know, but of course you all have your personal histories also, and when we bring in our personal histories, probably many of us have experience in multiple of these, regardless of what our present position is. You know, you might have more years doing brewing than you have roasting, but right now your day-to-day is very much in the activities that are kind of most typical of that roasting, you know, category, or that roasting family of activities, and everything that goes along with managing the inventory and placing green coffees and developing blends, and then working with the sales team. Elvira, I'll move on to you next. I'm glad that you're here with us. The question that I had asked each of them was just to, each of the other panelists was just to introduce yourself and then tell us a little bit about which activities you are most involved in.
Hi everyone, my name is Elvira and I am an authorized SCA trainer in the barista skills program. So on that part, a lot of the barista training, and with that I do local training, distance learning, and classes for the public. I work for a local award-winning cafe and roastery in Sacramento, California called Chocolate Fish Coffee Roasters. And the biggest focus there is roasting coffee to bring out sweetness and fruit acidity. Therefore, the goal is to highlight all of the characteristics of the coffee to make it taste as great as it is. and highlighting all the efforts that the producers put into their coffee from the farm. So that way, you know, the representation is the right one and a great one. And with that, I'm the education director and trainer for them, and my focus is making sure that everything relating to coffee education from new hires all the way to our seasoned baristas, they're getting all the information possible so they understand what's happening with the coffee, what new crops we're getting, why we roast the way that we roast, why we put so much effort into everything, and the direct relationships that Andy and Edie, the owners, have with the producers, because a lot of that we're at the final end of kind of the product itself, serving it to customers, and we want to educate customers as well so that way the passion that we have for coffee goes to them, and even when they're brewing coffee at home, they are passionate about it and they're doing it with the care and the right way, so to speak, to do it, so that way they get to enjoy a cup of coffee not only at the cafe but also at home. And I do, well, pre-COVID I did the classes for the public there, so it went from coffee tasting to home brewing to latte art and even home barista, and it was great to not only work with our own staff but also work with the public themselves, because you see a lot of passion and interest in the coffee industry from the clients themselves, from the customers, and even our wholesale customers, of course. And so we want to make sure that we just pass that on to everyone else, and that way they can pass it on to others and get them more involved in this industry, because it's an absolutely great industry. I am originally from Puerto Rico, born and raised, and there, while I was doing my bachelor's, I delved into the coffee industry, taking barista classes, and there's one of the many reasons I have a really big passion. My grandparents have been in coffee, my great-grandparents. My dad was in agriculture for decades, and I mean, his thing was sugarcane, but it's still, you see the passion that people have for, you know, for these products, and it's really, really great. And so with that, I just hope that in this panel and all the other webinars that have been happening, people get to learn more and understand, you know, all of the activities involved in the coffee systems map itself. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so from that introduction, I think we'll move into the next question that we asked each of you, which is about which actors you feel like you're the most connected to. And really, when we say actor, there's so many different ways that we could describe this, but we're talking about these different bubbles on the outside of the outer ring of this map graphic, and each of those is really more like a category. Can I have the next slide, please? It's more like a category than it is just an individual. There are so many different ways that we could break each one of them down and talk about how much, you know, diversity and nuance there is in that. But let's see, with these actors, the slide is not advancing for me. It still shows what activities are you involved with. Oh, there it is. So this is the list. There are 20 different categories that we've created. And yeah, I was really interested by each of your answers, things that were common between people who, like you all, are involved in these roasting and brewing activities, but then also some things that were distinct. Like Joan, in your case, you were one of the few people who answered on behalf of the roasting and brewing activities that you were involved with government agencies, especially on the producing side. And, you know, from what you just said about African coffee roasters, that makes sense, but I'd love for you to say a little bit more about which actors you feel like you are the most familiar with.
Great. So just to pick it from my answer on involvement with government agencies, our mission as African coffee roasters is to improve the life of coffee producers, and specifically coffee producers from Eastern Africa, because we deal with coffee producers from all coffee growing regions in East Africa. Now, one of the key things we realized was most coffee groups, first off, do not even know how the sector is structured, do not even know what legal requirements, what licenses or regulations are in play if they were to sell their own coffee directly without the use of a marketing agent, as it is structured here in Kenya, for instance. So one of the key things we embarked on when we started was to, and which we're still doing, is to engage with coffee producers and make it known to them that they can actually sell their coffee directly to us. All they need to do is build their capacity in terms of this is the know-how, these are the licenses which they need. Then if they are coming to negotiate prices, they need to be able to know the quality of their coffee, for instance, and know the worth of their coffee if they're going to get a true price and if they're going to be an equal partner on the negotiating table. So what we have done and which we're still doing is when we identify a coffee cooperative which is willing to work with us or which has an interest in our mission and our story, and more often than not, it's the coffee groups which contact us because our story is out there and they tell us they want to sell their coffee directly to us, then now we engage with the coffee regulator here in Kenya particularly and let them know of this cooperative and put them together so that the coffee cooperative can start working on their paperwork to be able to legally sell coffee to us directly. That's one way which we've been successful a couple of times, but it is a journey. It's not something which is going to change overnight. It is a journey to increase the efficiency and to build the capacity of the coffee producer, because what the coffee producer knows is what the few buyers who get to go to their society tell them. Other than that, they don't have an opportunity to interact with buyers. They only interact with the big buyers who get to go to their coffee cooperatives, and whatever information they get from those buyers, that's the gospel truth. And that's their point of reference for everything. So that's one. Secondly, because of the nature of what we do, again, we're very unique. So even for us to get our license, our operating licenses, it was the first time the government of Kenya had to regulate an entity as ours, because most entities trade in green coffee and export green coffee in bulk, whereas we were coming and saying we want to export roasted coffee. There are a number of roasters who export roasted coffee in Kenya. I'm not saying we are the only ones, but to the extent that the quantities that we're exporting to Europe, we are the only ones in that sense. We have a few who are exporting all over Africa, significant quantities, but to Europe, we are the only ones. So we had to really get into an engagement, a very involving engagement with the government of Kenya, just for us to be operational. And it is from that, therefore, our relationship was born and where our engagement has continued to this day. You will find that the way the global coffee sector is structured, and you probably, all of your years of experience combined, you would know better than I would. Coffee is exported from a producing country as green coffee and not as roasted coffee. So even, I am sure our logistics guy, even their Incoterms are in reference, when they go to select Incoterms, the challenge they encounter are in reference to green beans and negotiating terms of trade for green beans. And it's never ever for roasted coffee. So that's one thing which we see over and over and over again, and which is slowly changing the narrative, with customs regulations, slowly changing the narrative with the shipping companies, slowly changing the narrative with the local governments in the areas where we operate, and also with the buyers. Yeah. So that's why we are very, I would say, very active in terms of government engagement as African coffee roasters. Yeah. The rest of the sorry,
Go ahead.
the
No,
rest
keep
of the
going.
actors who I interact with, I mentioned them in certification. So of course, as Cleia mentioned also, all the certification which happens here in the roastery, the HACCP, the Rainforest Alliance, the UTZ, the Fair Trade, all the social standards, the SMETA audits or the BSCI audits. Because of that, then those are the people who I work with on a daily basis. But also when we go to the farmers and we have identified a need, for example, as African coffee roasters, we have identified a gap in organic certified coffee from Kenya. All our customers, or most of our customers, are asking for organic certified coffee. It's a hygiene factor in Europe. It's no longer even something new. It's what you will find in stores if you go to stores. Almost everything is organic certified. I understand even now in Denmark, I understand now they are labeling the things which are not organic certified because everything else is organic certified. So it's become a hygiene factor. So for that reason, we realized we're missing out on a market for organic certified coffee because we don't have organic certified coffee. So now my role was to go back to the farmers and explain to them, the Kenyan farmers specifically, that if we want Kenyan coffee to compete on a global scale, we have to get with the program in terms of certification. And then what is certification? How do we go about getting certified? And therefore get involved with the farmers in that way. Yeah. Yes.
Great. Cleia, Joan mentioned feeling a sort of a similarity between what she heard you say about the certifications that you manage the roastery and the work that she does. I wonder, besides the standards and certifications that you mentioned are a big part of your job, retailers also, who do you feel like you are most familiar with?
Allied industries, waste, non-governmental organizations, coffee drinks, media, research institutions, government agencies, producers, skilled laborers, standards and certifications, as we mentioned, future traders, retailers, auditors, and storage facilities.
That's a lot. And that kind of brings me to something about this map, if you were to zoom in on it, which is, and really be able to look at it in detail, which is that some of the activities in the middle have the greatest connectivity. The further you get out to the edges, the more connections you might have with that are very strong with certain groups, but then a lack of connection to others. So will you change the slide to the graph that's on the next page? Please, or the next slide, yeah. So here you can see that we graphed out some of the responses that we got from the everyone who took the time to answer these questions and list out where they feel like they are the most, and then we'll get to the least connected as well. But we had more responses from people in the roasting and brewing, which is that sort of grayish colored line. You can see it's got the highest total numbers. And unsurprisingly, that the set of bars that's fourth from the left is coffee drinkers. And it's not surprising that people who are involved in roasting and brewing have greater connectivity to coffee drinkers than anyone else. But if you go through and you look at some of the other categories, you can find some things in here that are interesting about where relationships are, and oh, I like the little cursor, and where they aren't. So, for example, with the transportation companies, which is almost all the way over to the other side, unsurprisingly, people who are in the middle in the importing and exporting functions, which is that greenish color, they have more connection to or report higher numbers of connections to transportation companies than people who are in their day-to-day lives most engaged in farming and processing or in roasting and brewing. So anyway, your response, Cleia, made me think about how people who are roasting, for example, might have connections both to producers through importers, and then also be connected to to certifications and also be connected to transportation companies and to retailers and just have a really wide range of relationships. I'll move.
Transportation, not that much, but
yeah, yeah. So I'll move us along just a little bit so that we can make sure to cover all of the questions into the actors that you feel like you are the least familiar with. And I'll pose this question to you first, Elvira. What actors do you feel like, looking at this list, you have the least familiarity with, or the least day-to-day connection to in your brewing role?
I would say from my list, it would be storage facilities, the intercontinental exchange, brokers, auditors, future traders, financial institutions, government agencies, insurance companies, transportation companies, non-governmental agencies. And, I feel that there is so much to learn from on all these areas, even the ones that we may not know about. And personally, there are areas that I found that even if I knew like just a smidget of it, I would love to be more connected with, because everything relates to one another. But I think, focusing on, being a trainer for our staff and wholesale customers and the public, sometimes you don't really get questions asking us what's our connection to, a financial institution or something like that. People are more focused on the brewing portion of it, or even the roasting. But definitely they are, they're all essential for sure.
Yeah. What you just said about consumers, I think that a lot of what all of us do in coffee, we have in our minds the consumer as the destination, that's where this whole process ends. Although, of course, I think in that case, we're often not accounting for waste in the supply chain. If we think about the end point being when the consumer, takes a cup of coffee and takes a sip and hopefully, has a wonderful experience. But that interest, or that mentality, I think, does sometimes shape the stories that we tell and who we talk about, because I think you're right that there aren't a lot of consumers who are asking about the relationship with the financial institution. How's your credit? Like, did your company get a PPP loan if you're in the United States from the government in COVID times? Like, those aren't the kind of things that people are asking about. So they don't become part of the story that we tell. But there are a few businesses, whatever kind of business they are, and especially at the small scale that many specialty companies operate, where a access to credit or a stronger relationship with a financial institution might not make a substantial difference to the business. So yeah, I think that's something that was interesting to me when you were listing off some of these actors, is that they are actors who might be in the middle when we're talking about futures traders, for example, or people whose work is just so behind the scenes that we don't think of them and we don't, tell their stories very often. Joan or Cleia, do either of you want to add anything to this question, build on what Elvira said, or reflect on who you feel the least familiar with?
Yeah. I totally agree with the concept of depending on who it is you're facing, and they will hardly get to ask you what your credit score is, for example. So in my case, I think I said futures traders is who, in my specific role, I am least familiar with and I would want to be more connected to. Because of the opportunity it accords the coffee producer here locally, yeah. And then also, I think the other player who we would want to be connected to is coffee drinkers as African coffee roasters, because then we would get the farmers to tell their story and not have someone else tell their story, yeah. And then it would close the gap between the coffee drinker and the coffee producer. I think that would be the excellent picture for African coffee roasters. And in your previous slide, when we looked at the transporters, exporters, importers, as the ones who are dealing with transporters the most, it reminded me of our unique position as African coffee roasters, in the sense that we export and we import. And so we deal with transporters both while we're importing our green coffee to the zone where we are at, because we are located in a special economic zone. So we deal with transporters when we're importing green bean, and we deal with transporters when we're exporting roasted coffee. So we have a wide breadth of coverage as African coffee roasters because of our geographic, the uniqueness accorded because of our geographic location. Yeah, that's what came to mind immediately. Yeah.
Well, what you just said about the lack of connection to futures traders, for example, in your role. If you go to the next slide with the graphs that we have about who our respondents are the least familiar with. Now, I think that that a lot of people, again, even some of the importers and exporters that we interviewed or that we heard from in the past two webinars, don't have a lot of connections there, again, because of the small scale at which many of these companies are operating. As you know, they're not seeing themselves as at least directly connected to, like, you know, the Intercontinental Exchange, ICE, here on the graph. And yeah, and that's true, really, I think, across the board. You can also look at this and see that that green line of exporting, importing, it's, you know, a little bit more stable across all the categories than the producers and producing side, farming, processing, and the roasting, brewing side, where the level of familiarity really varies widely. You know, people who are very connected or not connected at all, those kind of those go more together and vary more widely than the those central activity holders do, where there are just more connections, you know, more broadly across that category, regardless of where in the world they might be located. Yeah. Interesting, of course, nobody said coffee drinkers here, and maybe that's because everyone who's in coffee drinks coffee. So we're all thinking to ourselves, like, well, we all have relationships with coffee drinkers in our homes at the very least. All right, and so Joan, what you just said is a little bit of a segue to this next question about where you see the opportunity or where you would like to be more connected. You know, who would you like to be more connected with? And Cleia, I'll put this one to you, since we haven't heard from you. We didn't hear from you in the last one. Are there actors that you would like to be more connected with?
I'd like to be more connected with this intercontinental exchange, and this is mainly because from the actors that I'm least familiar with is this one. Mills will be very nice also to be more connected with, but it's also sometimes not, I know that, difficult also, but I would like also, would be nice. Yeah, these two mainly.
Yeah, and Elvira, you mentioned earlier that you're doing a degree program. And I know that from your responses that part of your motivation to do that was to be a connection, you know, thinking about your own background, being from Puerto Rico and your family's history in coffee. Can you say a little bit about how you feel like, you know, where there are opportunities for connection that you see?
Yeah, I definitely agree. For example, with Cleia on the Intercontinental Exchange. But on my list too, I even put furthering into the allied industries, research institutions, producers, mills, the skilled laborers, you know, that put so much work on the land, the non-governmental agencies, standards and certifications, even transportation companies, and future traders as well. Because I was writing a paper on transportation and distribution of green coffee in Puerto Rico, and I kid you not, it was incredibly hard to get in contact with producers or farmers or even roasters on the island. And thankfully, I was able to get in contact with one that was willing to give me, you know, it is, you know, in part personal information, but it helps, you know, it helps create a bigger understanding as to how things work the way they work on the island. And I also talked to an agronomist of the Department of Agriculture there. And he even told me it may be really hard for you to get in contact with them because they may not be willing to share information. But he told me in all honesty, for example, that the more these people are willing to open up about what they're doing and what's happening on their farm, the more we're able to also help them, from afar. And one of my goals is to, currently living here in Sacramento, California, there's so much I can do. So my biggest focus is working with the customers here, the community, in Sacramento and in California, but then also finding ways that I can, everything that I learn, I bring back to Puerto Rico and help them there, because there is so much to learn, so much to do. And yeah, the agronomist Quiles had, said if we're able to educate these agricultures and farmers on, how to work with their land properly, effectively, you don't need, 100 acres, to produce really great coffee, even specialty grade coffee. You only need maybe about 10 acres, costs you less labor, and you can produce just about as much or the same amount as some farmers are doing with 100 acres, and do more with the land and make more money from it and be able to pay people more. So I feel like the more I delve into this and I learn about it, I always say, and I believe, if I keep all the information I know to myself, it's not going to be of any value, because what we want to do is be able to help others and have them learn, so that way, we continue to help this industry, in the coffee industry, in the agriculture sector, grow. And also, like, with my generation, for example, the more we get these people involved, the more we can help the industry thrive as well, and kind of pass it on, so to speak.
Yeah, so kind of breaking down silos that may exist or that might have existed historically between these different roles, and using the tools that we have at our disposal, including technology, of course, but then also seeing ourselves as playing a role in that on a personal level. Yeah, I think that definitely, to me, speaks to the potential for a very different kind of system that would, of course, have a very different kind of map to depict it. Also, because you are currently pursuing this degree, it makes me think about one of the things that was pretty consistent across respondents. Can you move to the next slide? With this last graph of the responses that we received about where people would like to be more connected, and in that one, I realized that I don't have a graph to go along with it. That research institutions were one of the places, or one of the categories that was frequently cited as one where, regardless of whether someone was answering as an importer or as a producer or as a barista, that there's an opportunity for sure to strengthen the connections that we have there. So I'm hopeful that the kind of work that you're doing right now makes you one of those people personally who is doing that work to strengthen the industry research connection. Okay, well, we have a bunch of questions that have come in from our audience, so I'm going to shift into trying to read those and pose those questions to you all as panelists. Starting with two that have come in for you, Joan, that are kind of similar in nature, so I'll try to combine them. One from Elizabeth about transporting roasted coffee and what happens when there are delays. How long does it take between roasting and when it arrives in Europe? You've spoken a little bit to how it's different from roasting green bean transportation. And then Ian asks also, how is the coffee being exported from Kenya and protected from stalling en route? Is it all specialty or is some commercial?
Okay. I'll start with how long it takes to transport from here to Europe. Usually between 6 to 8 weeks. And our customers have the coffee in Europe. In relation to how we transport the coffee, we ship it. Sometimes we ship it, sometimes we airlift it, depending on the specifications from the client and how soon they want it. What happens when we have delays? I will say I mentioned we've been around for 5 years. So we have learned on the job. I can for sure say the first year was very tough in terms of logistics and getting the right fix, the right sequence of events, the right partners to work with. So the disadvantage we have as African coffee roasters is we consume our lead time, in the sense that 6 weeks is lead time for coffee to be in the store for a roaster who's next door. So when it arrives to the specific store, it's already 6 weeks old, if you get what I'm saying, in terms of the transportation. But we've been able to get a very tight logistics and turnaround time from the time the green bean is roasted to when it leaves the factory. Yeah, so we don't keep it in our factory. As soon as it is produced, it is shipped out. It is shipped out. It never stays in our factory. And maybe what I did not mention was that we produce to order. We don't push products into the market. You give us an order, we produce, and we ship it to you. So again, just to reduce the amount of time that a product will be sitting on a shelf waiting for a customer to come, or either way, yes. The other question was how do we keep it from staling? Mm-hmm. We nitrogen flush our coffee, and we have I would say we have a very good quality control system here within African Coffee Roasters, where we check our oxygen levels, we do our oxygen baths, we do our sealing. So we have a very tight quality control system in terms of making sure oxygen is not in the bag when we seal it, and that the sealing is perfect and it is not leaking. Yeah. Yes, to the extent we have been working on capsule development. I had Celia, I know, had just launched the first compostable and biodegradable capsule, 100%. So we've been working on that as well, and that was the biggest challenge in terms of retaining making sure it is fresh by the time it gets there, and there are no oxygen leaks. So I would say we have been very successful actually in getting a very succinct and tight production run, and making sure when it is produced, it is out of here and it is shipped. Because anything goes wrong, it's into our lead time, which it's into how much time the product can stay on the shelf. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Cleia, there's a question here that I'd like to put to you from Thomas, who asks, as a roaster, how can you trust in quotation marks, a given story about a cooperative, the well-being of producers, etc.? It says, knowing that commodity seems to communicate a lot about it too. In other words, what is the difference between a commodity story and the same story in specialty, despite the price paid? So knowing that where you are right now in the world, you probably, especially with COVID, don't have the same kind of visibility into producing cooperatives on a daily basis that Joan might have, for example. How do you trust that, or how would you answer that question? Do you have any advice for Thomas?
Yes, we keep our relationship with our suppliers very tight. So we know all our suppliers, so we know for sure what's going on, and also we buy a lot of certified coffees. So the certifications also helps us a lot, like RFA, UTZ, or the other certifications that we use. So this is one thing, and the other is the quality of the coffee delivered. So that's the thing. I always say that coffee doesn't lie. You cup it and you check the quality of the green beans, you know what's coming. So it's really we never have we import direct, and every single container we check and we don't have any problem. And because of the trust that we developed, and also because of the quality control. It's easy.
Okay. There's a question here from Ruben that, Elvira, I'm going to put it to you as the person who has the most kind of well, again, with COVID, maybe not daily, but the most interaction with the end consumer, who I think is who Ruben really liked to ask this question to. He says, and I'm going to translate from Spanish, although you probably read the original Spanish. The price of coffee has been so low on the futures market for such a long time, and it's way too costly to maintain the standards of quality and production that that are expected by people who have never harvested even one bean of coffee. How do you and how do we, reconcile the desires of buyers and of consumers, the expectations around quality, with the challenge and the cost of maintaining, those sorts of standards, especially in the context of low prices and climate change and mounting challenges? It's a big question, but I wonder if this is something that you think about and how you communicate that complexity to consumers, if you do.
Yeah, and hopefully I answer it into all of its entirety. If not, definitely let me know. But yeah, the coffee price crisis it's a real crisis, and it's really hard because that's the livelihood of the producers and the farmers and the people who work on the farm and pick the coffee and do the processing. So I think I believe that the biggest thing that, to help consumers understand, why do you pay, for example, $17 for a quarter, 3/4 of a pound of roasted coffee versus going to any other store and paying, I don't know, $5 for 2 pounds, 3 pounds of coffee easily. And what we have to tell them is, and what we tell them, for example, so like, for example, the owners of Chocofish have direct relationship with the producers. They pay more because they know that the quality of the coffee is worth much more than what's priced on the market, and because all of this, what you're paying is going directly to the farm. There is, for example, no middleman that's going to benefit from the money that you're giving them. If we are not able to pay more, then these farmers can't grow. They can't delve into, for example, trying to do experiments with the coffee that they have, trying to find other ways to sell their coffee or make their coffee stand out more, or even just directly with the growing of your trees and your shrubs and the maintenance of the farm. It's a lot of money and labor that goes into it. So the more that you pay for it, the better off the producer is, the farm is, the more we can support the industry. And putting it into, like, we're very transparent with our customers, and we tell them, it costs us much because we're paying way beyond. Oh, sorry.
Okay, real life is
Sorry. I have a vacuum under me and it just started. So excuse me. So basically, with that, when we educate our customers, we educate the clientele in understanding that you're not paying, you're not purchasing a $17 to $20 bag of beans and think that, oh, they're just trying to price us really high because they say it's specialty, and and because, you know, it's all the money is going to them. No, all the majority of this money is going to, you know, the producers at the farm and helping other people, you know, just have a sustainable life back in their coffee producing country. And with that too, it's also helping the customer understand you also are paying more because the quality of the coffee is so great that you're always going to be enjoying it. The quality, you know, your coffee is staying fresher for longer. It's always tasting great. And, you know, in part, like for example, I always have this in mind because I loved watching the movie Moonstruck, but you know, there's this guy who's changing pipes and in the bathroom, and you know, copper pipes versus your standard pipes, and he's telling them, you know, it costs money because it saves money. And in this case, you know, it costs money because, you know, these profits are going for the people and to help everyone. And so hopefully that kind of helps answer the question. I can get very passionate about this and delve into it more, but it's helping the consumer comprehend that you want to pay, you know, over the price on the market because you are supporting the coffee industry, you are supporting the producers, the farmers, the people who pick the cherries, the people who go work on the processing plants, everything. It's going back to, you know, the producers and the farms.
Yeah, I think what it is complicated. You know, it's a lot to communicate in often a very short amount of time. And what you said at the very beginning about how the price crisis is a crisis. I think that's, you know, that's absolutely true. And also the process of changing minds is, you know, a long-term process. So we're caught in this tension. And I think that it's appropriate that we're caught in this tension as specialty coffee about, you know, seeing something that is untenable and unsustainable, and also knowing that we can't just, you know, snap our fingers and make everyone do what we want them to do. There's a question here that I feel like I should probably field from Carolyn about waste, which is a little bit of an outlier on this map when it comes to those actors in the outer wheel, and I'll try to answer it succinctly. But just to say that you know, waste is a good example of one of those actors, although it's not an actor per se. That's why it's kind of an outlier, but that is seldom accounted for in the more traditional narratives of coffee. You know, that we talk about the activities, the stages it moves through, and this end product being the cup of coffee. That's where it all ends. But you know, what about the coffee grounds at that last stage? What about the you know, the packaging that the coffee came in? What about the if we're talking about the farm, you know, what about the skin of the coffee cherry? What happens to that? Does it get composted? Does it end up in a river as a contaminant? All of these questions are not ones that that again are top of mind for consumers, and that are frequently possible to forget about or to gloss over. But in aggregate, the waste is important, whether we're talking about, you know, physical waste as in those examples that I gave, or wasted energy from keeping machines warm, heating water that isn't necessarily being used at that moment, and just having that as part of our understanding of the system. There's waste in the system. You know, there are unseen actors in the system, people like, whether it's insurance companies or waste, that are maybe adding value or detracting value, or just important for us to recognize, you know, even if they're not one of those primary activities that gets coffee from point A to point B. All right, a question from Monica. Probably have time for one or two more. This question is aimed at all panelists, but refers mainly to Joan's talk on changing the narrative and bias of the supply chain that includes roasting in the country of production. How can other coffee actors, such as Cleia and Elvira, within various coffee supply chains, help to change the narrative and help to close the loop of bringing coffee back to the producers?
Okay, before I get into that question, just to add on to the question of waste and to circle it back to Elvira's question earlier in relation to what they're doing to communicate to consumers and to convince consumers that of the amount they're paying for a cup of coffee, because this waste, just to link it to the waste, all this waste which is being produced in the coffee supply chain, in the coffee value chain, someone is paying for it, just not the two price. It's going for free. And we cannot, as consumers, talk about climate change and not talk about paying for the climate change. And we will not pay into a fund called climate change, but we will pay for a cup of coffee with the true value of that cup of coffee, then which will go back to the farmer, and the farmer will have funds to dispose the waste properly. The cooperative society will have funds to put up a waste treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant. They will have funds to develop the correct packaging. They will have funds to take care of the health and safety of their employees. So that's how, that's the true value of that cup of coffee, honestly. And if you, I mean, I think it's not comparable to the commodity market, because first off, if you just look at the price, how is a coffee farmer earning a decent income with that price of coffee? Just if you just do the math, how are they earning a decent income? How are they being able to support their family with that price? It's impossible. So someone is paying for that cost. We are just not willing to accept it, but someone is paying for that cost, either by not being able to afford basic things and not, you know, but someone is paying for a cost. I'm sure you all know there's no such thing as free lunch. Someone is paying somewhere. Now, back to how actors can, actors like Celia and everyone else can change the narrative. Even before I answer, I would like to say that African coffee roasters cannot roast all the coffee in the world. There will be actors like Celia, there will be actors like Elvira's, but there's room for all these actors. And the first narrative which actors, big coffee roasters can change is that coffee cannot be roasted in a country of origin, because it can. We have done it. We are doing it. Tomorrow I will wake up and come to work, and our roast master will wake up and come to work, and our logistics guys will wake up and come to work, and the transporters will come and pick our container. It can be done, but it can be done. It is being done differently, not in the same fashion that I would do it if I was a roastery who is just roasting within the same municipality. So that's the first narrative which has to change. And I'm very happy. In our team here, we have people who are believers of coffee cannot be roasted in a country of origin. And they came and we worked at African Coffee Roasters together. And they traveled to Europe and bought the bag they had roasted in the factory here. And they took the coffee. So that's the first step, just to start changing the perception. And I like what you said, Kim. Changing minds, I think, is one of the biggest, hardest things ever. And it doesn't happen overnight. And there has to be a lot of proof of concept. And people like seeing facts and like seeing things done before they can believe, for good reason. So yeah, that's the first narrative, which I think big players can change.
Yeah,
Thank
Cleia
you.
or Elvira, do either of you want to weigh in on that? Anything to add?
As roasters, like in UAE, what we do normally is we can, as roaster, we can pay a higher fee for the producer. This way, he are going to be capable to do more in the farm. But and in the end of the day, I'm Brazilian, and in Brazil, as we are not only the biggest producer in the world, but also the second biggest consumer in the world, and coffee roasted there, because in Brazil, they cannot import any coffee from any other country. They must roast in Brazil. They are not capable to import anything from any other country. So, Joan, you guys are doing a great job. And I think this is one of the ways to do the things. And I really would like to see more in the centrals. You know, this all the centrals, Central Americas, they could do much more in roasting locally and bringing this coffee keep the coffee in the country.
Yeah, this is a
You don't need to
webinar
export
series.
everything. Yeah, you don't
dream
need
of
to
hosting.
export everything. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I dream of hosting a webinar series on just different, domestic consumption or sort of iterations, variations on this system wherein coffee is roasted in the country where it's grown and then exported, or it's roasted in the country where it's grown and then it's consumed locally, as in Brazil. Those are both really great examples of how different coffee can look, and things that maybe reflect much more of what we'll see in the future versus what we've seen in the past and what's still the dominant model in the present.
And that's sustainability also, because you're helping the farmers directly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're
and I was gonna briefly add the same thing. As John said, that there is the perception that you can't eat, if you produce coffee, you can't roast coffee. But I remember in my early years, I went to a coffee camp and we stayed overnight at a coffee mill and everything, and they took us up and they said, okay, now you're gonna pick the coffee. Okay, now you're gonna take it to the processing plant and we're gonna weigh this, and so we're going through the wash process. Okay, now you're gonna walk over here and you're gonna watch them roast the coffee. And for example, the parchment, they use that as their fuel to roast. So I was even surprised, how you can use you can use your waste as fuel too. And then now you're going to go over here and it's going to get packed. And then now, it's going to be sent off to different supermarkets or small markets or coffee shops. And that was there in Puerto Rico. And then, I move upstate and I make it here to California, and I start working for Chocolate Fish, and I look at their retail shelf, and they have this vast, variety of coffees from different countries, and I'm so surprised because what I, would consume in Puerto Rico was mainly coffee from Puerto Rico, picked right there from the farms. And then you come to, I came upstate and I saw all of this and I was just like, oh, I can try this coffee from this country and I can try this coffee from this country, because you don't always have that opportunity. So having also, roasters in different states and countries, importing coffee from other countries to give people the option of what they want to drink, and teach them, what is it that you enjoy the most of your coffee, helps educate us and helps us, understand that, you can find coffee from many other places. And, even in Puerto Rico, I send coffee from, from Colombia, from Kenya, from Guatemala, from wherever I can find, I send it back to my family so they can try it too. And they can see that there's so much opportunity and option in this world.
Yeah, lots of opportunity. I think that's probably where we'll have to end. Our time has run out. But just thank you all so much for your time today. I appreciate the time that you put into answering the questions we sent you initially, to being here on this webinar, to sharing your perspectives and experiences so generously with the audience. So thank you to Cleia, Elvira, and Joan. Thank you all who are tuning in and listening to our conversation today. Thank you to Savor again for sponsoring this series. And if you if you had to leave early, which I don't even know why I'm saying this, if you left early, you're not listening to this. But for anyone who had to leave early and for anyone who missed previous webinars, you can find those on sca.coffee/watch. So thank you again, and look forward to the time when we're all together in the future and we can continue the discussion in person.
Yes.
Thank you, Kim, and everyone for this opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.